You ever wonder? All these cars, all these people in these cars, every single individual light, and we don't know any of them, or very few. They drive by. In the time it's taken me to say this, more than 100 people have gone north or south just over my shoulder. As I said, I have no idea who they are, but God does. Knows everyone intimately. And even more importantly, Christ died for each and every one of them. As we listen to this story, the passion narrative of Christ's last hours, we're going to break it up and listen to some of those people that are in the periphery. Most often when we read a Bible passage, we imagine ourselves as the main character, a David, a Moses, a Abraham. And in the Passion stuff, that would be Peter or the disciples or even Judas. Sometimes you might condescend and be a minor character. But this time, we're going to look at those that, like us, might seem insignificant, tiny bit players in the whole narrative of Jesus' death. And yet, Christ died for them. Let's hear Jesus' story and theirs.
It was 2 days before the Passover and the festival of the unleavened bread. The chief priests and scribes were looking for a way to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him, but they were cautious. They said, "Not during the festival, or there may be a riot among the people." Meanwhile, Jesus was in Bethany at a house of Simon, a man who had leprosy. During supper, a woman came in with a beautiful jar of expensive perfume. She broke the seal and poured the perfume over his head. Some of those at the table were indignant. Why was this expensive perfume being wasted? They asked. She could have sold it for a small fortune and given the money to the poor. And they scolded her harshly. But Jesus replied, "Leave her alone. Why berate her for doing such a good thing to me? You will always have the poor among you, and you can help them whenever you want to. But you will not always have me. She has done what she could and has anointed my body for burial ahead of time. I assure you, whenever the good news is preached throughout the world, this woman's deed will be talked about in her memory."
Jesus says, as long as the gospel is proclaimed, what this woman did will always be remembered. And yet, we have no idea who she is. An unnamed person that comes to Jesus and anoints him. Now, we can guess maybe the why. It had happened to Jesus before, earlier in his ministry, and the woman did what she did because she had been forgiven much, and Jesus uses that as his lesson. But in this case, he puts a different spin on it. That the aspect of what she did was to prepare him beforehand for his burial. And so he says, you'll always have the poor, but what she did was not waste, but worship. Again, she will always be remembered and always go unnamed. And Jesus died for her.
Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples, went to the chief priests to arrange to betray Jesus to them. The chief priests were delighted when they heard why he had come, and they promised him a great reward. So he began looking for the right time and place to betray Jesus. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, the day when the Passover lambs were slaughtered, Jesus' disciples asked him, "Where do you want us to prepare the Passover supper?" Jesus sent 2 of them into Jerusalem to make the arrangements. "As you go into the city," he told them, "you will encounter a man carrying a water jug. Follow him. At the house he enters, say to the owner, 'The teacher asks, where is the guest room where I can eat the Passover meal with my disciples?' He will take you upstairs to a large room that is already set up. That is the place. Go ahead and prepare our supper there." So the 2 disciples went on ahead into the city and found everything just as Jesus had said, and then prepared the Passover meal there.
You might also, this is food for the conspiracy theorist. Because if something happened to Jesus coming down from Galilee, he's still outside of Jerusalem, and things are already in place. We don't know who these two are sent into the town, but it's all prearranged. Just like it was for Palm Sunday, where they were told to go in and they'd find this donkey, they would ask something, and the donkey would be left if they gave them that set phrase. This is what happens here. Disciples are sent into the city. And they're to meet a man carrying a water jug. Now, in those days, the equivalent of a man doing woman's work, carrying water in the middle of the city, would be as if I were to say, go to Pioneer Place and find a gentleman wearing a tutu. It would be obvious. They follow him. He leads them to a place where they meet another man who, after a series of nice phrases, says there is a room all ready for them to prepare. And these two prepare. And yet later, it's the 12 disciples with Jesus that show up. So there seems to be this whole network of people that we don't know, following Jesus, doing his bidding, already prearranged. How cool is that? We don't know who they are, and we're just speculating. But Jesus did, and Jesus died for them.
In the evening, Jesus arrived with the 12 disciples. As they were sitting around the table eating, Jesus said, "The truth is, one of you will betray me, one of you who is eating here with me." Greatly distressed, one by one they began to ask, "I am not the one, am I?" He replied, "It is one of you 12, one of whom is eating with me now. For I, the Son of Man, must die, as the Scripture declared long ago. But how terrible it will be for my betrayer! Far better for him if he had never been born." As they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread and asked God's blessing upon it. He then broke it in pieces and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take it, for this is my body." He then took the cup of wine and gave thanks to God for it. He gave it to them, and they all drank from it. And he said to them, "This is my blood, poured out for many, sealing the covenant between God and his people. I solemnly declare that I will not drink wine again until that day when I drink it anew in the kingdom of God." Then they sang a hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives. "All of you will desert me," Jesus told them, "for the Scriptures say, God will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. But after I'm raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee, and I will meet you there." Peter said to him, "Even if everyone else deserts you, I never will." "Peter," Jesus replied, "the truth is, this very night before the rooster crows twice, you will have denied me 3 times. "No," Peter insisted, "not even if I have to die with you would I ever deny you." And the others all vowed the same. Then they came to an olive grove called Gethsemane, and Jesus told them, "Sit here while I go and pray." He took Peter, James, and John with him, and he began to be filled with anguish and deep distress. He told them, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and watch with me." He went on a little further and fell face down on the ground. He prayed that if it were possible, the awful hour awaiting him might pass him by. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Please take this cup of suffering from me. Yet I want your will, not mine." Then he returned and found the disciples asleep. "Simon," he said to Peter, "are you asleep? Couldn't you stay awake and watch with me even 1 hour? Keep alert and pray, otherwise the temptation will overpower you. For though the spirit may be willing, the flesh is weak." Then Jesus left them again and prayed, repeating his pleadings. Again he returned to them and found them sleeping, for they just couldn't seem to keep their eyes open. And they didn't know what to say. When he returned to them a 3rd time, he said, "Still sleeping? Still resting? Enough! The time has come. I, the Son of Man, am betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." Immediately as he had said this, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived with a mob armed with swords and clubs. They had been sent by the chief priests, the scribes, and other leaders. Judas had given them a prearranged signal. The one I kiss will be the one to arrest and to take into custody. So, as soon as they arrived, Judas walked up to Jesus. "Teacher," he exclaimed, and kissed him. Then the others grabbed Jesus and arrested him. But someone pulled out a sword and slashed off the ear of the high priest's servant. Jesus said to them, "I am some dangerous criminal that you have to come armed with swords and clubs to arrest me. Day after day I was with you in the temple teaching. Why didn't you arrest me there? But let the scriptures be fulfilled." At that, all of his disciples deserted him and fled. A certain young man had been following behind, clothed only in a linen nightshirt. They caught hold of him, but he managed to escape, leaving the linen shirt behind and running away naked.
He was just a kid. Only Mark's gospel records this little adventure of a young boy running into the night naked, the first streaker ever mentioned. And yet that's probably because it could have been Mark himself. Mark, who later sat at Peter's feet and heard these stories and put it in the first gospel. Just a kid following an adventure, seeing what happens to Jesus and his entourage until it gets kind of scary. The disciples flee and the mob turns around and all they can grab is him, and then all they have left is his shirt. Sometimes we're like that too. Following can be an adventure until it gets kind of dangerous. Now, we're only speculating that this young kid was Mark, but Jesus knew, and Jesus died for him.
They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and scribes were assembled. Peter had followed him at a distance right into the courtyard of the high priest. He was sitting with the guards, warming himself by the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and they contradicted each other. Some stood up and testified against him with this lie. "We heard him say, 'I will destroy the temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another not made with hands.' But even then their stories did not agree." Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Have you no answer? What do you have to say for yourself?" But he was silent. Again the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus answered, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven." The priest tore his clothes and said, "Why do we still need witnesses? You've heard this blasphemy. What is your decision?" All of them condemned him as deserving death. Some began to spit on him, to blindfold him, and then to strike him, saying, "Prophesy!" The guards also took him over and beat him. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she stared at him and said, "You also were with Jesus, the man of Nazareth." But he denied it, saying, "I do not know or understand what you are talking about." And he went into the forecourt. Then the rooster crowed. And the servant girl, on seeing him again, began to say to the bystanders, "This is one of them." But again he denied it. Then, after a little while, the bystanders again said to Peter, "Certainly you are one of them, for you are a Galilean." But he began to curse and swore with an oath, "I do not know this man you are talking about." At that moment the cock crowed for a second time. Then Peter remembered what Jesus had said to him, "Before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And then he broke down and wept bitterly.
You were one of them. You know, we've been talking about people we have no idea who they are in the story of Jesus' passion. But this is an instance where we probably know exactly who we're talking about. You can't be a follower of Jesus without having someone at one time or another point an accusing finger at you, demanding that your life match up your faith, that your walk goes with your talk. I imagine this servant girl was strengthened by that, seeing this big, brave Peter cowering before her, and then watching him weep bitterly. Or maybe that changed her. Did she end up saying, look what I did, how I exposed this person for the fraud he is? Or did she see how he wept bitterly over his own weakness? We all have those people in our lives, and we like to have them get their comeuppance and stand tall, and sometimes we do, probably most of the time we don't. But the fact of the matter is, Jesus knows exactly who that person was and who everyone that threatens us or exposes us is. And he died for them.
As soon as it was morning, the chief priest held a consultation with the elders, scribes, and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He answered, "You say so." The chief priests accused him of many things. Pilate asked him again, "Have you no answer? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus made no further reply. So Pilate was amazed.
You know, it's an interesting thing about Pontius Pilate. We know a lot about him, but Matthew adds this nice little subplot that morning Pontius Pilate got a message from his wife saying, "I had a dream about Jesus, have nothing to do with him." Imagine what he thought, seeing Jesus' name on the docket. You wonder sometimes if all the people that came before him to try guilty or not guilty, if Jesus even registered, but this comment kind of makes it seem that they do. There are a lot of people out there that see their friends, their loved ones, husbands, wives, children becoming infused with the gospel and have that same message. Have nothing to do about Jesus. I've had a bad dream. Pilate had everything to do with Jesus' death. He washes his hands to kind of make this separation, and yet having Jesus crucified is what Pilate's known for. For all those that try to talk others into believing, into standing up or having anything to do with Jesus, we have a special place to have God remember. But above all, Jesus died for Pontius Pilate's wife, as he dies for the whole world, as he claims the world as his own. Jesus died for her.
Now it was the governor's custom to release one prisoner each year at Passover time, anyone the people requested. One of the prisoners at that time was Barabbas, who had been convicted along with others for murder during an insurrection. The mob began to crowd in toward Pilate, asking him to release a prisoner as usual. "Should I give you the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked, for he realized by now that the leading priest had arrested Jesus only out of envy. But the chief priest had stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas instead. Pilate said, "Then what should I do with the man that you call the king of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Crucify him!" Then Pilate asked, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him!" So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them. And after having Jesus flogged, he handed him over to be crucified. The soldiers took him into their headquarters and called out the entire battalion. They dressed him in purple robes and made a crown of long, sharp thorns and put it on his head. Then they saluted, yelling, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They beat him on the head with a stick, spat on him, and dropped to their knees in mock worship. When they had finally tired of mocking him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes on him again. They led him out to be crucified. A man named Simon, who was from Cyrene, was coming in from the country just then. They forced him to carry Jesus' cross. Simon is the father of Alexander and Rufus, and they brought him to the place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull.
We just have their names, Rufus and Alexander. Only Mark includes them. Matthew, Luke, John, when they tell the story of some man named Simon from Cyrene carrying Jesus' cross, overlooks these two. But they were his sons. And I know in today's news, A good component is at our southern borders, and we look at all these minors that are separated from their parents. But this is what happens in this story. Imagine how Rufus and Alexander felt, coming to Jerusalem from faraway Cyrene, and then all of a sudden catching under this parade of horror, and their father yanked out of the crowd, a cross being put on his shoulders and marched up to Skull Hill. How scared they must have been, how alone, how frightened. We don't know exactly how it works out, except that Mark can mention him by name, talking to the people in Rome 30 years later, writing his gospel. So they were known then and disappear from history after that. The whole idea of people that we pass by and don't know their full stories. But these two young kids get reunited with their father at the foot of the cross. What a better place to be, to recognize firsthand that Jesus died for them.
They offered him wine drugged with myrrh, but he refused it. Then they nailed him to the cross. They gambled for his clothes, throwing dice to decide who would get them. It was 9 a.m. when the crucifixion took place. A signboard was fastened to the cross above Jesus' head, announcing the charge against him. It read, King of the Jews. 2 criminals were crucified with him, their crosses on either side. And the people passing by shouted abuse, shaking their heads in mockery. Ha! Look at you now, they yelled. You can destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, can you? Well, then save yourself and come down from the cross. The chief priests and scribes also mocked Jesus. He saved others, they scoffed, but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, come down from the cross. Then we'll believe him. Even the 2 criminals who were being crucified with Jesus ridiculed him. At noon, darkness fell across the whole land until 3 p.m. Then Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Some of the bystanders misunderstood and thought he was calling out for the prophet Elijah. One of them ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, holding it up on a stick for him to drink. Wait, let's see if Elijah will come to take him down, they said. Then Jesus uttered another loud cry, and he breathed his last. At that moment, the curtain in the temple was torn in 2 from top to bottom. When the Roman officer who stood facing him saw how he died, he exclaimed, Truly this was the Son of God. Some women were there, watching from a distance, including Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James the Younger and of Joseph, and Salome. They had been followers of Jesus and had cared for him while he was in Galilee. They, along with many other women, had come with him to Jerusalem.
Mark says, some women went to the tomb. If you take all 4 Gospels and their stories of Easter, there are 5 women that are actually mentioned, which kind of goes against the unnamed portion of it. There's Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of Jesus, Mary the mother of Joseph and James the Younger, and Joanna and Salome. All these women that provide the kind of chain of custody. They watch Jesus die. They watch his body removed from the cross, laid in Joseph's tomb. They watch, and then they're the first people there Sunday morning, only to find the tomb empty. They may be named, but their stories are connected in a very nice way. Mary Magdalene obviously was one who Jesus healed the demons and followed him in a special fashion. His own mother was at his feet at the cross. The other Mary could have been the mother also of James and John. Salome, sometimes some scholars say perhaps was the one that had the upper room and the mother of John Mark. Joanna's an interesting story in that her husband was one of the officials in the high court of Herod Antipas and followed. These women, we're told, took care of Jesus and his entourage and followed him to the bitter end. And in fact, it's these women that were women whose testimony would not even be accepted in the courts of their time. These women become the first recognized authorities that Christ has risen. These women staked out the most sacred portion of human history, an empty tomb, the womb of life everlasting. Jesus died for them, and he knew them, their whole stories, as he knows us and our stories. His story is ours as well, for Jesus died for us.
This all happened on Friday, the day of preparation, the day before the Sabbath. As evening approaches, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of council, who was also waiting expectantly for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Pilate couldn't believe that Jesus was already dead, so he called for the Roman officer in charge and asked him. The officer confirmed the facts, and Pilate granted him the body. Joseph bought a linen cloth, and taking down the body, wrapped it in the cloth, and laid him in a tomb that had been carved out of the rock. He then rolled a great stone against the door of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where the body had been laid.
We have heard the story of Jesus' final hours, the Passion narrative. And we prefaced it with the idea, were you there? And in a sense, if you were there, you would be one of the rather insignificant people, not saying anything about you, but about the nature of the world. And that's why we try to highlight the people that are often hidden in this story, the people like us, the hundreds of people that we see pass by us every single day. You know, I'm sometimes amazed, I get into the age in life where I actually read the obituaries and death notices in the newspaper. And I always, like I said, get caught up in the fact that most of the time, very rarely do I know anyone that's listed in there. That should be a good thing. And yet at the same time, I've been in this community for 25 years and I've gotten around and it seems like that just highlights the fact that so many people out there, we have no idea who they are. But God does. He knows them intimately, every detail of their lives. And Jesus loves them all with that same intimacy and thoroughness as he loves us. The story of his death is the story of God's embrace of each and every one of us. That's how he rolls. And as this day comes to an end, and we have the Saturday where everything, the entire world is at rest, we know what's truly going to roll is the stone away from the tomb Sunday morning. It's kind of fitting this year that Saturday, tomorrow, is April 3rd, 2021. You can write it in shorthand, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we know what happens next. Have a blessed Good Friday and a wonderful Easter. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we have heard the story, and now there's a silence in the cross, and darkness shrouds it. When the turmoil dials down, we're left with nothing but dreadful death that would have been done. To our lost, looking up into heaven, there's no answering shout. You portray power and humility, strength and weakness, dignity in service. And we did not know how this could be. But that's why we call this Friday good. Help us to find your kingdom as we serve in quietness and obscurity, with despair and with hope. You love the world so much that you gave your only Son to die for us, each and every one of us, known to you. We give you thanks. Amen.